Hello friends, welcome to Hybridacademy and to the another session of Learn Adobe Photoshop for Beginners. In the third part of image corrections and adjustments, we will learn some more features of Adobe Photoshop on how we can correct the images and adjust the images in terms of colors, filters and exposure. In today's session of image corrections and adjustments part 3, we will learn about how to darken area in an image, color balance, photo filters and image exposure. Let's quickly start with our session. So the first part of the session says how to darken area in an image. A neat little trick most photographers use in Photoshop is to draw focus on the subject within the image and to do so make the background darker, as this way the image stands out. To do this or to darken area in an image, we can perform the following steps. We will first open the image in Photoshop. We will add a new layer above the image layer. We will fill the new layer with black or dark grey color as desired depending on the requirement. Temporarily, we will reduce the opacity of black filled layer. Use the eraser tool or masking tool to remove the black layer from the main subject. Once this is done, we will adjust the opacity which we had reduced earlier to our desired value, and your picture will be ready with the darkened areas around. Let's see this in Photoshop. So in Photoshop, let's assume this is the picture on which we wish to work on darkening the areas of this image. Now this can be to highlight the main subject in this picture, or this can also be to hide the models which are standing behind, because they are a bit of a distraction to show our main subject. Now to do this, what we will do is that we will create a new layer above this main picture and we will fill black color on that layer. Now since the complete layer is filled with black color, the main picture is not visible. So to see the main picture, we'll reduce the opacity of the black layer. Now you can see the main picture is visible. We'll not reduce it completely, but to some extent. Now we'll select the eraser tool by pressing the letter E, and we'll make sure that the hardness of the eraser is set to 0. We'll change the size of the eraser as required. We'll keep it a bit bigger, but not bigger than the main subject. And now using the eraser, we'll try to erase the areas where the main subject is there, somewhat like this. Make sure that the complete subject is highlighted from the black layer. And now I'll increase the size of the eraser to a bit larger and will decrease the opacity of the eraser to, let's say, 30%. And now I'll again click on the main subject so that the nearby areas are not very sharp. Once this is done, I'll select the move tool and I'll increase the opacity of the black layer as per our choice. So now you can see the models which are standing behind are in the dark area, but the main model, the main subject is highlighted. So using this way, we can darken or we can black out the areas of our image which are not required or which we want to hide from our image. Now let's move on to the next section of this session, that is color balance. Color balance adjustment is used for general color correction. Color balance works with complementary colors that have inverse relationships, that is cyan and red, magenta and green, yellow and blue. This means that if an image has too much of cyan in it, this cyan will need to be decreased, which will cause the red value to increase. Be careful not to overdo color balance adjustments, or you may replace one incorrect color for another. To color correct the color balance adjustment, select the color balance adjustments from the adjustments panel. A color balance layer will be added to the layers panel and a properties panel will open. Change the settings in the properties panel. Determine visually which color needs to be added or subtracted. A good way to judge this is to find a part of the image that should appear white and determine if it has another color cast over it. Alternatively, play around with the sliders to see what changes can be made to get a better sense of color scheme. Use the tone drop-down to select tonal range to be changed, midtones, shadows or highlights. Midtones is a good place to start. Click and drag the color sliders to change their value. Changes made will automatically apply to the image. Toggle the preserve luminosity option to see how that changes the image. This setting is totally optional. Now let's check this out in Photoshop. In this sample image, if you look, you see a lot of yellow color casted due to sunlight. Even the trees, they are looking yellow and brown. Although in the real picture, in the real image, if you see these trees should not be so much of yellow and so much of yellow cast should not be there. Now to adjust this, what we can do is we can go to image, we can go to adjustment and we can select color balance. Using this color balance, we can balance this image easily and we can reduce this yellow color, but this will actually destroy the original picture. And to save the original picture, instead of doing it directly on the image, we can use the adjustment layer as we did in other things. So we can go to new adjustment layer and from here we can select color balance. This is exactly what we were looking at the color balance dialog box, but this will actually apply an adjustment layer above the original layer, which will not destroy the original picture. Now in this adjustment layer, if you see, the first thing is tone, which gives you three options. One is shadows, midtones and highlights. Shadows is basically the dark areas of this picture. So these are the trees which are into shadows and this some gray area where the shadows are falling. These are the areas which will be affected by shadows. The second is the midtones. These are the medium colors which are between the white areas and the dark areas. So this is the main thing which affects the main color balance in the picture. And the third one is the highlight. This is completely the white area or the bright area of the picture, and we can use them as per our requirement to change the color balance of this picture. Below that, you see there are three sliders. One is for the cyan and red, then we have is for magenta and green, and then we have is for yellow and blue. So these are, if you see, these are the primary colors we have in any picture on the internet. So red, green, blue is the basic colors of RGB, and cyan, magenta, yellow, this is the CMYK standard, and these are again the basic colors. These colors are actually opposite to each other. Cyan is the opposite of red, green is the opposite of magenta, and yellow is the opposite of blue. So as we switch these sliders in any of the directions, accordingly the colors are adjusted. And the last option we have here is preserve luminosity. This actually ensures that the luminosity or the brightness or the light of the picture remains as it is. We'll see this in the example. So let's try to reduce the yellow cast of this image. And to reduce the yellow cast, the first thing we'll do is to change the highlights to midtones. We will reduce the yellow cast from the midtone. And further to do this, we will increase the yellow sliders towards blue. So we'll see that the yellow color from the image is reduced and the blue color is increased. Due to that, you can see there is some blue shade coming in the middle of the picture, and even the trees are not looking that yellow now. Similarly, we increase the red color slightly to give it some natural look, and we can also move it towards magenta. Now if you look at this picture, this looks a bit of natural as compared to the previous one which had a lot of yellow cast in that. The second thing we'll do is we'll work on shadows. We'll also move the yellow slider a bit towards blue in the shadows. Now you can see the dark areas are getting less yellow and more blue. Similarly, we'll slide this towards red and this one towards magenta. And lastly, we'll work on the highlight. In the highlights, we only change the blue slide, the yellow and the blue slider, and you see this is now comparatively looking much better as compared to the original picture. And to check this, we can remove the adjustment layer, we can hide the adjustment layer, and you can see this was a lot of on yellow tone, and this is more towards a natural picture despite of this sunlight which is falling from the top. So this is the use of color balance, using which we can balance the color of the picture. And coming back to luminosity, now if you remove the luminosity, you can see the picture gets very much bright because all these colors are actually adding something to this picture. So to include the actual brightness, or to ensure that the picture remains at its actual brightness level, we always check this option of preserve luminosity. Now let's move to the next section of this session, that is photo filters. With color balance, we can always tint and enhance colors in a photo using Photoshop photo filter. If the photo filter isn't one of the most widely used features in the program, it certainly deserves to be. Not only is it easy to use, it's the only feature in Photoshop that lets you choose color simply by selecting the color names from the list. It also has several valuable uses, one of which is neutralizing color cast of any photo using photo filter. At its most basic level, the photo filter can be used to warm up or cool down the overall colors in a photo. But since we are going to use the adjustment layer version, which comes with the built-in layer mask, we can combine multiple photos to tint and enhance specific areas of an image individually. Let's see this in Photoshop. Now let's try to apply the photo filters on this image. So to apply the photo filters, we can either go to Image, Adjustment, and we can select Photo Filter from the menu. But again, as said earlier, this will destroy the original image, as it will apply the photo filter on the original image, and the original image will be destroyed. The option which is better than this would be through the adjustment layer. So instead of applying it directly on the image, we will use the adjustment layer. So we'll go to New Adjustment Layer, and from here we will select Photo Filter. This will again give us the same options which we had in that dialog box. And from here we can either select the desired filter, like warming color, warming filter. We have 3 warming filters and 3 cooling filters. So whichever filter you select, you can increase the density, and that effect will be actually visible on the image. Now this entirely depends on your choice how you wish to set the density. Similarly, we have cooling filter, so this turns it to blue. We have red, we have green, we have violet. So whichever sort of filter you wish to apply to this, that is possible, and based on the density, it will increase or decrease the color which you have selected. You can also use a custom filter color from this color option. You can click here, and whichever color filter you wish to apply, you can click on that color and you can select the color to apply the filter and click on OK. Again, using the density, you can either increase it or decrease it. This also has the option of preserve luminosity, just we had in the color balance. So this will actually not affect the brightness or the glow of this picture. If we uncheck this, you see the brightness gets affected, but if we click on this, the original brightness will remain intact even if we apply any filter. Now let's quickly move on to the last section of this session, that is image exposure. If you are a photographer, you will very well understand what is the meaning of underexposed, correctly exposed and overexposed. But for a layman, let's try to understand this. Now we know that if we look at a picture and if all the colors and everything looks perfectly okay, that should be considered as a correctly exposed picture. Whereas in a picture, if you find it to be too dark, that means we have lesser light in that. And if you look at the histogram on the top left corner of each image, the histogram is moved a bit towards the left of the image. which shows that this is actually an underexposed image. So the actual light required in this picture is less than its actual level. So nowadays in camera we have the option to balance this exposure right before clicking the picture, whereas at times we still get an underexposed picture after clicking it. And once we look at that on the actual screen or system, we get to know that the picture is underexposed. If the light on a picture is perfect from all aspects, that is considered as a correctly exposed picture. And in a correctly exposed picture, you will always see the histogram spikes in the middle of the histogram. So if you look at the middle picture, on the top left corner there is a histogram, and if you can see, all the spikes are in the middle of the graph, which shows that this image is correctly exposed. Similarly, at times we get picture which is overexposed, which means there is a lot of light which is not actually required in that picture. This usually happens in sunlight because the light is too bright and we are not able to look the brightness on our screen. So in such instances, the picture gets overexposed. Even in terms with flash, when we adjust the flash manually, at times the picture gets overexposed because the light is too bright and we do not require that much of light. So in such cases, the histogram, if you look at the histogram on the top left corner, the histogram moves more towards the right of the graph, and you will see all the spikes on the right corner of this. So this shows that this picture is overexposed. Now we can adjust all the situation in Photoshop using the image exposure option. Modern camera exposure and dynamic range optimization systems are extremely sophisticated, but the majority of images still benefit from a tweak to the exposure or contrast. Even when a camera does manage to produce an image that's nearly to perfect, you may decide to reduce the exposure to ensure that there is a detail in the brightness highlight, or to increase it to bring out the shadow details. Many landscape photographers, for example, routinely underexpose the foreground of their images to make sure that the white clouds have some tonal detail. All that's required to get the image looking absolutely spot on is a little exposure adjustment to brighten the shadows and midtones while retaining the elusive highlight detail. Let's see this option in Photoshop. In Photoshop, this is the sample image on which we'll work on the exposure. So to adjust the exposure of this particular image, we can go to Image, we can go to Adjustment, and from here we can select the exposure to set the exposure of this image. But this will again destroy the original image, so we will not use this dialog box to apply the exposure directly on the image, but we will use the adjustment layer like earlier. We'll click on this and we'll select exposure from this menu. Now this will give us the following options. One is the preset, using which we can set the exposure either to -1 or to -2 or even to +1 or +2. Now this is similar to the option which we have in our camera. But if you look at this, this will only adjust the exposure slider, not the offset slider and not the gamma slider. So we'll let this be on the default, and let's try to understand what is exposure, offset and gamma correction. Now as discussed earlier in the color balance dialog box, we have 3 levels of color in any picture. One is the highlight, which is the bright or the white areas of the picture. The second is the shadows, which is the dark and the black areas of the picture. And the third one is the mid-tones, which is somewhere between the white and the black, that's the gray tone. So all those areas which are in the middle tone, which are neither very exposed or neither very white or bright, and neither very dark or like shadows. So those areas are known as the mid-tone. Now the first thing, that is exposure, this entirely works on the highlights of any picture. So in this example, if we increase this exposure, you'll see all the whites of this image are getting highlighted and are actually getting burnt. Now burning here means that the actual details of that white area are getting lost. Similarly, the offset works on the mid-tone. So if you reduce it, the picture will become dark, and if you increase it, it will increase the grays in the picture because it cannot convert the dark areas directly to white using this. It converts it to the gray tone. And the last one, which is gamma correction, this works on the shadows. If you reduce it, you can see that the shadows are getting clear, and if you increase it, the shadows are getting darker. This is also affecting the highlights. So all these sliders actually work on the complete picture, but the main focus of each slider has been defined. So the exposure works on the highlights, the offset work on the midtones, and the gamma correction works on the shadows. I'm resetting the picture, and let's try to set the right exposure for this. So I'm increasing the exposure to an extent that the highlights are not losing its details. I'm reducing the offset a bit so that the mid-tones become a bit darker, and I'll also reduce the gamma correction to ensure that the shadows look good. Now if you compare this picture with the original one, you will make out the difference, that how the image got sharp and is looking much better as compared to the original picture. So this brings us to the end of this session. Let's quickly summarize what we have learned. We learned how to darken an area in an image. We learned about color balance, photo filters, and image exposure. Moving further, in the next session, that is lesson 6, we will learn the first part of manipulating images, and specifically we will learn how to isolate an object from an image. So we will actually learn how to crop out a particular thing or the subject from an image so that we can adjust the background and we can accordingly update the main subject of the picture.
Thank you for joining the complete session. Hope you liked the content. Please share and subscribe our channel so that your friends also get benefited with the information, acquire free knowledge, and learn new things. We are eagerly looking forward to your support. Thanks, take care, and stay safe. Hope to see you in the next session.